Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about single line text in the buyer side. So let's start with an empty template and go to the text option here. So we got the various kinds of text-based frames we can insert. Let's take the single line text. To make this single line text editable for the buyer, we only have to go to the shopping cart and enable content. When we then click on the shopping cart on top here, we always toggle to the buyer side so we can see how it will look in your shop system later on. So I can click on the text and I can write my text in there. I have the little OK button here. That's all. If I want to allow the user to not only change the content but also colors, fonts, I will find all the settings over here. So let me enable the color and font selection here. If we turn over to the buyer side, we have the color selector now and we can change the color. But we won't see any fonts because we have to upload some fonts first. We recommend to use Google fonts or any fonts you completely rely on that they are free to use on websites. Once I'm in the resource panel here, I press a little plus on top and I choose my fonts. So let me select some of the fonts here and open them. You might have seen that when we enable the fonts, that on top we got the font groups, which actually show us which fonts will be available for that frame. So the buyer fonts is the default group, it's always there, so we can use it, but of course you can also create your own groups. So let me just take a bunch of fonts here and put them to the buyer fonts section. And if I turn over, I'm now able to select the font. There are a couple of more settings you find for single line text down here. Mandatory means that the user needs to change this before he or she could proceed to the checkout. So let's have a try. We don't change the text here, we try add to basket and we get this message, which will be in the language where the browser is, the user is using it. And you also in the translation table can actually adjust all of this text. So it says, please enter your text, it automatically focuses the frame. So I can change the text, which then allow me to proceed to add to basket. Offensive words will actually take the offensive word list, which you can adjust in the account portal and doesn't allow the people to write words you don't want to have in your text. Another option instead of mandatory is to use don't print if not change. The difference here is the user don't need to change the text, but still can proceed to the basket. But if we render the production files later on, that frame will just disappear because it has not been changed. That could be helpful for if you have an optional subline for an image. If the user enter it, fine, you will print it. If not, just you skip it. You basically have two ways to allow people to edit your single line text. The one I already showed you, where the user inline edits in the frame. The second option is that you go to the document, buyer side setting, and here you have inline single line text editing. And if you turn this off, then in the moment I click on the text, I will get a text box to the right and can actually type here. Together with this feature, also the clear on focus flag corresponds. If I enable it, I click on the frame and I enter the text box, it automatically removes the default text. Another very interesting option for single line text is that you can let the user edit multiple frames at once for fancy text effects, for shadows, for whatever you want. So let me just copy this frame. The frame has still the same content. But I, for example, can change the font to something like that and maybe change the color. It's not the most beautiful design. It just shows you how a lot of these very interesting snippets we have are done. So now I got these both frames, which actually have the overlying font. If I select both of them and group them to a single frame and then go to the buyer side, because they have the same content, I still have only a single text box. So when I start writing here, it actually fills both of these texts. So it's super easy to build these kinds of of text, which is actually consisting of multiple frames. And by the way, the color selection now gives you two options for the foreground and for the background text. A good example where you can see how this works is if you go to stickers, click on the search function and search for fancy text, fancy font, and then we can select one of these fancy fonts like here, the Zucker one. It actually consists of five different text frames. Or it's actually 4 text frame and 1 image frame for that design in the background. But if we go to the buyer side, you will see that this is still just showing a single text frame because they all have the same text content. If you want to have grouped elements which should appear as separate input fields, you can actually, let me put it like this and change the color slightly. You just only have to put a different content in it. So let's have this text 1 and text 2. If I group them again, so grouping can be done with right mouse click and group. Also, you can do just Control or Command G on a Mac. And if you go to the buyer side again, you now have independent text that you can edit. So thanks for listening and hope to see you next time.